Good morning, church. So today I want us to continue from where we left. I will not do a summary today because there's a lot of stuff for us to cover. But I just want to add some few things on this series, Kings and Priests. We are really trying to focus on how God raises men, which is very important. And I told you that as we go along, you should notice two very important things: issue of time, and then axe sharpening, in the process of which God raises men. So on time, I want to add one more thing. This comes from Matthew 13, 5 to 6. Matthew 13, 5 to 6 on the issue of time. Matthew 13, 5 to 6 reads, this is the parable of the sower. This is what it reads. The other seeds fell on rocky ground where they did not have much soil. And immediately they sprang up, since they had no depth of soil. But when the sun rose, they were scorched. And since they had no root, they withered away. From this parable of the sower, there's a lesson we can learn. Things just spring up all of a sudden. Things that just spring up all of a sudden, most of the time they have no root. And if it has no root, it has no depth, they can easily be stopped, foiled, hindered, hampered, or frustrated. If it has no root, it has no depth, in other words, there's no conviction, there's no time to build character, there's no time to learn, there's no time to enhance your skill, you just spring up as a local champion. Usually do not last. You can even see, I think these things happen even in the world, where you have musicians that had one hit song and they became famous in one day. It doesn't take time. Yeah, it doesn't take time. Within 1 or 2 years, they are gone and people forget about them. But people that have spent their time sharpening their axe, understanding the art, when they might take a long time to spring up, but once they spring up, they are there to last. So that's the issue of time. I just wanted to add about time. I also wanted to add two other components to the axe. After the axe sharpening, two other components just for you to take note. For a long time, I think the church Israel is divided in two phases. The traditional churches fall on the issue of they promote the law a lot, less about grace. You have to do this, you have to do that. If you don't do this, you don't do that. You can't be saved, you have to do A, B, C, D. That's the traditional church. On the other side, the modern Pentecostal church sometimes goes extreme too. It goes on the extreme side of grace. Yeah? They go on the grace side where you don't have to do anything, Jesus did it for you. Yeah? Or both things are two extremes. The truth is in the middle. The truth and grace came through Christ. The truth is the law, the principles of God. Grace is the enablement. If we go to 1 Corinthians 15, verse 10, it's a place that really highlights what grace is like. 1 Corinthians 15, verse 10. But by the grace of God, I am what I am. And his grace toward me was not in vain. On the contrary, he's now disputing what the extreme grace preachers talk about. On the contrary, I worked harder than any of them. Though it was not I, but the grace of God that is in me. In the extreme side of grace, people can't associate grace with working. Here Paul is saying, if there's any example of somebody who the grace of God has been at work in, is myself. And actually, when the grace of God is operating in my life, I even worked harder. he worked harder. And he says it was not me who gave the enablement to work harder. It was the grace of God. Just like if you think the book of, I think it's Jude or James or one of those, where it talks about the grace of God has come upon the world, making us not to sin. Just to paraphrase. Yet, on the other side, people say grace is the license to sin. It's a different grace that the Bible talks about and the grace people preach. The grace here is making somebody to work harder. The grace, same way that I talked about, also is making somebody not to sin. This is the true enablement of God. So I just wanted to highlight that grace is not a license to be lazy. Yeah? Grace is not a license to be lazy. Because in the church, people like to flood churches to receive. I receive this, I receive that. Yeah? And every time I receive. When are you going to be giving? The Bible says it's more blessed to give than to receive. The other thing about kings and priests I wanted to take note is that kings finance priests. Kings finance priests. So your kingship will finance your priesthood. Your kingship will finance your priesthood. I'll give you an example of a king, David, playing his kingly role, supporting the priestly role. It's in 1 Chronicles 29, verse 1 to 4. 1 Chronicles 29 from verse 1 to 4. And David the king said to all the assembly, Solomon my son, whom alone God has chosen, is young and inexperienced. In other words, God doesn't mind you being young or inexperienced. It's not a requirement. And the work is great. It doesn't matter how great the work is. He called Solomon to do something that Solomon's ability could not do. And for the palace will not be for man, but for the Lord. So I have provided for the house of my God, so far as I've been able, the gold of the things of God, the silver for the things of silver, the bronze for the things of bronze, the iron for the things of iron, the wood for the things of wood, besides great quantities of onyx and stones for setting antimony, colored stones, all sorts of precious stones and marble. Listen to this. Moreover, in addition to all that I have provided for the holy house, I have treasure of my own, of gold and silver. And because of my devotion to the house of my God, I gave it to the house of my God 3,000 talents of gold. Modern day value of 3,000 talents of gold is $6.41 billion. And of gold Ophir, and 7,000 talents of refined silver. Modern value, $191 million. For overlaying the walls of the house. That's the king providing for the priest. You think that's just David. Let's go to a modern day king compared to the Old Testament, in the New Testament. Acts 20, 34 to 35. Paul, the apostle. Acts 20, 34 to 35. He says, you yourselves know that I have worked with these hands of mine to provide everything that my companions and I have needed. I have shown you in all things that by working hard in this way, we must help the weak, remembering the words that the Lord Jesus himself said, there is more joy in giving than receiving. In other words, it is more blessed to give than to receive. This is Paul we're talking about. Paul was a tent maker. He said he used to do his tent maker business. That's kingship. He would work to finance the kingdom assignment he had. He would not go and beg for people for money or for resources. Instead, it was him, the same guy who would go preach around, the same guy who would go and give people food from his pocket. You understand that our modern day society, that is not how we look at things. We separate the people that work in church, the people that work in offices, work in offices. That's not how God created us to do. He says everyone has to work with their own hands. So it doesn't matter whether you have a title called reverend, pastor, evangelist, prophet. There must be something you're doing. There must be something you're doing. God is good. He will provide for you in the environment that you are. So there's nothing wrong you providing for your pastor, providing for the people that are shepherding you. There's nothing wrong with that. But as somebody who is a pastor, you should also be doing something. You should also be doing something. Because if we say, no, we don't have time, I am full-time pastor. Paul was a full-time pastor. Yeah, he was full-time, but he still was able to do other things to raise funds for himself. And that's very important. That's what I wanted to talk about, adding from last week, that the king finances the priest. So this is extremely important for all of us. Where you're working right now, you are doing your career. How much of that is financing the work of God in your life? How much of it is financing the work of God, apart from financing your own needs, which is what we've spent time on? Do you have on your budget, on your monthly budget, what you are doing for God? What you are doing for His kingdom? Or we are used to this bringing change to church business? I'm not asking for tithe here. Neither I'm not asking for seed. No. You yourself, you should know. So let me give you an example. A simple example. From your salary, people that earn a salary, if you want to go and evangelize, you can use your salary to pay for minibus to go where you have to go evangelize. There's no excuse. If you find people there that I need, you can use your own money to pay to buy things that they need. You don't have to go and, because we're used to this thing, always trying to raise funds. Fundraising. Every time is fundraising. Every other 2 Sundays is fundraising. Paper sand. So people can't just come and give when there's a need. We have to stand in front and, say verses about giving. Then we take the wrong verses too. You see, the world laughs at us. Because the world doesn't finance its projects like that. You can't finance a major project by asking people to say, give little by little. It doesn't work like that. If you see the story in the Old Testament of even David as an example, when he contributed the most and then asked the people to contribute, and the people contributed more than enough, he had to stop them. Let's go to the story of Joseph. I said I want to give an example of how God raises men. Joseph as an example. Joseph was 17 years old when he encountered God. 17 years old. Joseph is the firstborn son of Rachel, the child of the promise. The secondborn was Benjamin. So remember, he grew up in an environment where his mother was despised. Rachel was despised. And he grew up in that environment. When he was born, obviously the father was very happy because this is now the wife that the father really chose. Because remember, there were 2 of them, right? Rachel and Leah. The father wanted Rachel, not Leah. So then he gets born. The father obviously has an affection over the mother. So the affection for the mother goes to his firstborn child of that mother, who is a child of the promise. Joseph. And at 17 years old, as he was sleeping one day, he dreamt and he had 2 dreams. That was his encounter with God. The Bible doesn't give us any other background from Joseph apart from that's where it starts. Joseph was 17 years old. One thing you will notice from this is that every journey of kingship starts with an encounter with God. Every journey of kingship starts with an encounter with God. And this encounter with God becomes the foundation of your priesthood and the expression of your kingship. The encounter with God will become the foundation of your priesthood and the expression of your kingship. This man, Joseph, encounters God through a dream. As we continue, see how important this dream was. I've chosen Joseph. I could have chosen Abraham. The principle is the same. I've chosen Moses. The principle is the same. There's always an encounter. In your life, can you sit down and say, I can see that this was my encounter with God? Because that moment of your encounter is very vital for your walk with God. Every king and priest has a story that is beyond knowing about God. It is more about knowing God experientially. A lot of people are flooded in churches. They call themselves Christians. They know about God. They don't know God. Because if I told you to tell me your story, it will be a story about God. It will be about what you heard. It will be about, you can tell me everything Paul did, but you can't tell me what God has done for you, what God has done in you, what God has done through you. You can't tell me that. When you find yourself in that position, go on your knees. Because your life will be a frustration if you have no encounter with God. Joseph's encounter with the two dreams that he had. You know what he ended up being? He ended up being a dream interpreter. And through that dream interpreter, he ended up being a prime minister of a country. From dreams. Yeah? From an encounter with God with dreams. He didn't say God stood there and said, Joseph, Joseph, stand up. Like he saw some light like Paul. No. The guy was asleep. The guy was asleep. So sometimes we want supernatural things. Yeah? Supernatural things. We want to make it, our encounter with God, we want to create it in a certain way. But God is unlimited. God is unlimited. If we go to the dreams of Joseph, they're in Genesis 37, 5 to 11. I'm not going to read. Take notes so that we cover ground. Genesis 37, 5 to 11. The two dreams, when he told his brothers, and then he told his father, they made an interpretation. It was obvious for them what these dreams were. They even, and the questions they asked him, they said, are you indeed to reign over us? Or are you indeed to rule over us? When he told them about the dream. They made an interpretation, and the interpretation was correct. When the father heard about his dreams, the father asked similar questions. He said, shall I and your mother and your brothers indeed come to bow ourselves to the ground before you? The Bible doesn't record what Joseph responded. It only tells us that the father kept these things to heart. That's all. And interestingly, the brothers realized that there must be something about these dreams. There must be something about these dreams. And remember, I told you the story about Joseph, that Joseph was born to Rachel. The father loved him, and the father was not hiding that he loves Joseph. So obviously, all the brothers hated him because he was favorite for his dad. Of course, that's not what you should be doing when you have kids. But when they hated him, what they eventually did is they sold David to Egypt. We know the story. Can you imagine when he was being sold and he remembered the dream? The dream said he will rule over his brothers and his family, basically. That's what the dream was about. He finds himself being sold to Egypt as a slave. In the dream, he was a leader. In reality, he was a slave. If it was you, what would you have done? You could have said that dream was from the devil. Correct? Yes. God cannot lie. So that dream must not be from God. It's from the devil. But this is what happens. He's being sold. He's sold to Egypt. When he's sold to Egypt, he's bought by a man called Potiphar. Potiphar was working in the king's palace. So he got Joseph as his slave. The Bible tells us this thing in Genesis 39, 2-6. I'll read this one. Genesis 39, 2-6. I'll read the story. It's very important. The Lord was with Joseph, and he became a successful man. The Lord was with Joseph, and he became. I want to underline it, became. Yeah? And also that the Lord was with Joseph. Okay, let's continue. And he was in the house of this Egyptian master. His master saw, underline saw that the Lord was with him. So in other words, people can see that God is with you. It's not something you speak about. It's people see. Yeah? And that the Lord caused all that he did to succeed in his hands. So Joseph found favor in his sight and attended him. And he made him overseer over his house and put him in charge over all that he had. From the time that he made him overseer in his house and over all they had, the Lord blessed the Egyptian's house for Joseph's sake. The blessing of the Lord was on all that he had in the house and in the field. So he left all that he had in Joseph's charge. And because of him, he had no concern about anything but the food he ate. Now Joseph was handsome in form and appearance. The Bible is telling us that the Lord was with Joseph. But if you continue the story, you understand why the Lord was with Joseph. When Joseph is tempted by Potiphar's wife, he says something very important. And you gather from it, I will not read it, you find it in Genesis 39, verse 9. You gather from it that Joseph feared the Lord. Joseph feared the Lord. Do you realize that if Joseph had slept with Potiphar's wife, Potiphar would not have known? There are many women out there that are sleeping with people around. They are married and their husbands don't know. There are many people out there that their kids are not their husband's kids. Their father does not know. Yeah? Because people can hide things. And do you know what would have happened to, I like this part, what Joseph would have been? Joseph would have been the head of all the houseboys in that house. He would have been the most loved houseboy. Yeah? But instead, Joseph ended up in the prison. Some of you here that have jobs or that are aspiring to work, it will be the same. Women especially. Or now I think it's getting to young men too. There are older women who have nice positions, they sleep with young men. And all of a sudden, you're just rising in your organization. Yeah, just rising. Why? Because you sleep with the boss. Yes, you become the favorite worker in that business or in that company. But your time is coming. And others, I know, they have been fired because they refused to sleep with their boss. That's exactly what happened to Joseph. That's the fear of the Lord. He feared God more than he feared man. And we see here that the presence of God in Joseph's life was made manifest by the favor of the Lord that was upon his life. This was expressed through success. Yeah? He was successful. And not only him was he successful, his master Potiphar was successful. And Potiphar was a very smart man. Was a very smart man. He realized that the reason why I'm succeeding is not because of me. It's because of this young man. I remember last week I told you the favor of the Lord is one of your advantages. Is one of your competences. That doesn't appear on your CV. God's favor made Joseph a competent man, as it made Potiphar succeed. And it is your competence that will make your master for you to find favor with your master. For you to find favor with people. It's your competence. And you see, God is interesting. He's blessing an idol worshiper. Yeah? He's blessing an idol worshiper, Potiphar, because there's his son there. The world needs your competence, this competence or favor. The world needs it. And this is how you minister in your workplace. People should see a difference because you're there. People should see a difference because you are there. If you thought this was just a one random event, if you go to Genesis 30 verse 27, you find another story. In this time is now the story of Jacob. Yeah? It's now Jacob. In Genesis 30 verse 27, where Laban, his father-in-law, maybe let's read it, 30:27. Where Laban, his father-in-law, wanted to keep Jacob at all cost. But Laban said to him, if now it pleases you, you stay with me. I have divined that the Lord has blessed me on your account. I have divined. This guy he went to a singanga to figure out that this man must be special. So in other words, even a singanga know that there's power of God here. So this guy, from a singanga, he realized that there's something special about Jacob. Because Jacob had the presence of God. Jacob found favor in the Lord. And because Jacob found favor with the Lord, Laban succeeded. So you realize that this is a huge competence we carry. It's a huge competence we carry. You also notice, I want you to notice from this story, I know we say in church, we are highly favored. I like asking one question. Can you prove to me that you're favored? Also, I wrote an exam and I passed one exam. Oh, the favor of the Lord is upon me. No. God's favor, ladies and gentlemen, is not one of success. God's favor is not one of success. Because the presence of God is permanent. If you are aligned with God, it's permanent if you're aligned with God. That's the importance of priesthood. Priesthood brings the presence. The presence makes you competent. It is not one-off. It is very consistent, and it's consistent irrespective of circumstances. God's favor is not a one-off success. It is consistent irrespective of circumstances. Joseph is still favored by God, but he still ends up in prison. If it was you, you could have said, no, the favor of the Lord has left him. Is that correct? The favor of the Lord has left him. Look at him, he's in prison. Jesus, same thing. The favor of the Lord has left him. Look, they're whipping him. Now he's going to die on the cross. He's dying on the cross. The favor of the Lord has left him. No, it doesn't work like that. If you go to Genesis 39 as well from 1923, I will not read it, just keep that in mind. You will see very clearly, the scriptures tell us that the favor of the Lord was with him, even in prison. And the Bible says he found favor with the head of the prison because the favor of the Lord was with him. It wasn't one off. He continued going. This is the second person where the favor of the Lord on Joseph is somebody else can see it. This is the prison guard can see it. Just like in the first time Potiphar saw it. There will be another time another man will see it. And remember, I want also you to remember the dream he had. Despite the dream, he was still rejected by his family and was still sold. And on top of that, he was sent to prison falsely. If it was you would have been saying, God, why me? It's true, right? God, why me? But Joseph is rejected by his own family. He's sold to be a slave, despite having an encounter with God in a dream. He's gone to prison being falsely accused. And God did not make it such that Potiphar should understand that the wife was lying. God left it. Let's read this 39:19-23 then. Genesis 39:19-23. As soon as his master heard the words that his wife spoke to him, "This is the way your servant treated me," his anger was kindled. And Joseph's master took him and put him into the prison, the place where the king's prisoners were confined. And he was there in prison. But the Lord, put the word but. There's always a but. There's always a but. But the Lord was with Joseph and showed him steadfast love, gave him favor in the sight of the keeper of the prison. And the keeper of the prison put Joseph in charge of all the prisoners who were in that prison. Whatever was done there, he was the one who did it. The keeper of the prison paid no attention to anything that was in Joseph's charge, because the Lord was with him. And whatever he did, the Lord made him succeed. Same language as in Potiphar's house. Potiphar says, I've left everything to you. Do whatever you got to do. I will not even pay attention apart from my wife. He gave him everything else but his wife. Here, the head of the prison, makes him in charge of every single thing. The guy had no experience. But the favor of the Lord was on him. And God said, whatever he did, he succeeded. I want you to notice one thing. What kept him in this position is the success. I will repeat. What kept him in this position is success. Success is an output. It means when he's given an assignment, he would fulfill that assignment excellently. Not just say, oh, I am favored. But when you're given something to do, it's all mediocre. You'll be out. Because the world will keep you because you're competent. In Potiphar's house, he managed the house so well. That's why Potiphar kept him. So God is not going to use something different. He uses the same way. There's a problem to be solved. He gives you the power to solve the problem. When the problem is solved, as a king, you develop influence. You reign. That's how it works. And also it's very clear here. You'll notice. The one who made Joseph to succeed was God. The one who made Joseph to succeed was God. The one who will make you to succeed is God. It's because of your relationship with God. Remember, one of the characteristics of Joseph is that Joseph feared God. And because he feared God, the presence of God was with him. And because the presence of God was with him, he succeeded. And because he succeeded, he found favor. You could have thought God is done with this man. He uses a different thing, but same principle. What does God do? God then gives Joseph, he didn't ask for it, a supernatural gift of interpreting dreams. He gives him this gift while he's in prison. The gift that God gave Joseph was a key for him to get out of prison. I said this last week, that I thank God that He's blessed me with many different titles that I can use. But the titles are not for me. The titles are keys. They open doors in certain places that I could not have opened those doors. It's the same thing here. He gives Joseph a dream to be a dream interpreter. And that dream interpretation gift is what opened the door for him to end up in the palace. And how he learned how to do this was in prison. In other words, God made Joseph a problem solver. where there are many problems, that's where you should be. We like running away from problems. Our country has many problems, right? This is where we're supposed to solve problems. This is where we're supposed to be to solve problems. If you want to see God, you will see him here. You don't need light where there's already light. You need light when there's darkness. And if you notice, because of his fear of the Lord, in prison, in Genesis 40, verse 8, this is what this man said when the two prisoners said their dreams to him. This is what he says. They say to him, we have had dreams and there's no one to interpret. There's basically no one to solve this economic problem in Malawi. There's no one to solve this problem in this family. And Joseph said, and where the word Joseph is, put your name there. He says, do not interpretations belong to God? Please tell them to me. Do you realize that Joseph did not go and say, let me go pray about it? Do you notice that? It means Joseph had a relationship with God. It means Joseph, he trusted him so much. He knew no problem, there's no problem God cannot solve. He had the confidence to say, just tell me. While you are at work, when they give you a tough problem, the excuses that you give, those tough problems they give you at work or at school are an opportunity for you to shine. Oh, me, I don't have the skill set. I can't do this. I don't know how to do it. You will never grow. The reason why people go to the gym and they grow muscle, like Keith, is because they start every day they're lifting a higher weight than what they lifted. Yeah, and it's painful. Yeah, until the pain stops. And then the next time you see the shirts are not fitting. This world needs problem solvers because the world is full of problems. The only reason why Joseph was invited to the palace because not the king, because the king liked him. The king did not know about this guy. He didn't know. The guy is in prison. Why should I waste my time to bring a prisoner to my palace? The only reason he invited Joseph is because of his problem-solving ability. That's it. People don't have to like you. But trust me, if you carry a skill, a problem-solving ability, no matter what, they will call you. You don't have to like you. Well, some of you are focused on being liked and not being competent. And when he goes in the prison, God gave him a trial. So when he passed the trial, he interpreted the dreams. When he interpreted the dreams, he decided, you know what? He wanted to help God. So he told the man, please, when you go there, remember me. Yeah? I have interpreted this dream. Yeah? Remember me. The guy didn't remember him. For 2 years, he forgot about him. There was something also there God was teaching Joseph. That your reward comes from me, not from man. Yeah? Your reward does not come from man. It comes from who? From God. The man, Joseph, is still in prison for 2 years. The other guy is enjoying himself in the palace. Now Pharaoh had dreams. When Pharaoh dreamt, Pharaoh was confused. He tells his people, guys, I have a dream. What does it mean? That man who forgot about Joseph, now God made him to remember Joseph. And the man said, you know what, there's a man in the prison I was with. He managed to interpret my dream. In other words, this is what they'll say. There is a lady in this place who can solve this problem. He solved this problem 3 years ago. This one, he will solve it. That's how you rise up. That's how they will remember you. You think you have been forgotten. If you have no problem-solving ability, they will really indeed forget you. This man is in prison. He came in Egypt as a slave. The king invites him. Now, in this time, in these days, when a king invites you and you claim to have a solution to a problem and you don't offer the problem solution, you get killed. They didn't joke. It's not like our kings, who you can go to State House and lie to them, and you go and nothing happens. We have an example in our own country. Do you remember Bridging Foundation, the story about Bridging Foundation? Clearly, the story ended up to be a lie, but nothing has happened to anybody who brought that lie. You can't do that to Pharaoh. I'll read this in Genesis 41, 12 to 16, 25 and 32. A young Hebrew was there with us. This is now the servant telling Pharaoh. The servant of the captain of the guard, when he told him, he interpreted our dreams to us, giving an interpretation to each man according to his dream. And he interpreted to us, so it came about. I was restored to my office, and the baker was hanged. Then Pharaoh sent and called Joseph for his competence. He didn't call Joseph because he liked the boy. And they quickly brought him out of the pit. Quickly. When you have a solution, they will look for you. Yeah? That car you never expected will come visit your house. They will look for you. You have a problem. You have a solution. They quickly brought him out of the pit. And when he had shaved himself, you see, he didn't just show up with his hair like mine. He realized that Pharaoh does not like my hair. He didn't say, this is how I like it. No. The Bible says, when he shaved himself and changed his clothes, he didn't say, is this been my one of our name? No, he knew he was going to a Paris, guys. You get it? He shaved himself, put on his suit or whatever, robe, whatever. During that time, the king would say, this is a serious man. And he came in before Pharaoh. Remember, he was going there as a problem solver. Yeah, he was going there as a problem solver. So your appearance matters. Yeah, your appearance matters. And Pharaoh said to Joseph, I have had a dream, and there's no one who can interpret it. And there's no one who can what? Interpret it. I have heard. It said of you that when you hear a dream, you can interpret it. I have heard of you. Then when we give you this economic problem, you can offer a solution. I've heard. They will hear. Joseph answered Pharaoh, it is not in me. God will give Pharaoh a favorable answer. He didn't say, yes, I'm a son of an amazing here. Yeah, I can do it. No, I can do it. I've done it so many times. I've done it so many times, so just tell me. I'll tell you. No. He said, I'm able to do this because there's a God. Then Joseph said to Pharaoh, the dreams of Pharaoh are one. God has revealed to Pharaoh what he is about to do. And the doubling of Pharaoh's dream means that this thing is fixed by God. And God will shortly bring it about. Do you realize he made this interpretation? I want you to notice. He says that he dreamed twice, so it means the thing is fixed. It's going to happen shortly. Do you realize that he is talking to himself too? How many dreams did he have? Joseph. He had 2 dreams too, right? When he's talking about this, it's not him talking, right? It's God speaking to him too. That you also had 2 dreams. Those dreams are fixed. That thing is going to happen, and it will happen soon. If you go to Proverbs 18, 15 to 16, that's why I love this Bible. The Bible is consistent throughout. If you understand the principles of it, you will see the principles everywhere. Look at this. Proverbs 18, 15 to 16. The mind of the prudent acquires knowledge, and the ear of the wise seeks what? Knowledge. A man's gift makes room for him and brings him before what? Great men. A man's gift brings him before what? If you have to acquire anything, acquire knowledge. The wise seek for knowledge. They didn't say it just comes from nowhere, right? There's acquisition of the knowledge and there's seeking of that knowledge. It's your part, it's not God's part. In other words, whatever you have chosen to take in your life, whether you want to be a lawyer like Keith, or you want to be an engineer like Tanda, be the best at it. Be the best at it. There's no excuse. Be the best. Oh no, it's Ningopanga because I'm just going through this. This is not my plan. My plan is something big there. If you can't do this part now, that big plan, forget about it. Wherever you are, no matter how small the task, be the best at it. Notice one thing. I will not try to read this, maybe because of time. But if you go to Genesis 41, 33 to 44, and then you go to 46. Maybe just read it. What you notice is that this man, he goes, what was he supposed to do? He was asked to go and interpret a dream. That's it. He goes there, he interprets the dream. This man of excellence did not stop there. Because just interpreting the dream, he was done. That's what you do. When your boss gives you an assignment, you just do the bare minimum. I have done the assignment, boss. Here it is. That's it. Bye-bye. It's 5 o'clock. Yagwanayoka. Yeah? Yeah. In Malawi, you like saying, Sizagwatu. Trust me, you can never progress. You can never progress with that. Never, I'm telling you. I am fortunate. I have people working with me that I look after. It's very simple. I can tell you, I just need you to work with me for 1 week. I'll tell you, you make it or you not. It's not difficult. Your attitude. No matter how skillful you are, I really don't care, to be honest. For me, I don't care how good you are, how skilled you are, but if your attitude stinks, forget it. Because there will always be somebody else better than you. So that's why God builds not only skill, but it builds character. The world builds skill, not character. The world sharpens personalities. That's why you can, if you want to be a good leader, these are the personality traits you need to showcase. So you just showcase and lie to people. But your character is a joke. They can't teach you character in class, by the way. But I can teach you how to speak. I can teach you how to do public speaking. I can teach you that. I can teach you how to present. I can teach you that. Yeah? I can teach you that when you're trying to make a point, you pause, just like I've just done. It makes you to pay attention, which has just happened. Yeah? You can learn these things. But you can't teach you character. The Holy Spirit is the one that does that. So the Holy Spirit will teach your character, will teach you your skill, will build you holistically. Let's read the story. Genesis 41 from verse 33 to 44, then we'll jump to 46. Now, therefore, let Joseph select a discerning and wise man. This is now Joseph giving the solution. And set him over the land of Egypt. Let Pharaoh proceed to appoint overseers over the land. And take 1/5 of the produce of the land of Egypt during the 7 plentiful years. And let them gather all the food of these good years that are coming and store up grain under the authority of Pharaoh for food in the cities, and let them keep it. That food shall be reserved for the land against the 7 years of famine that are to occur in the land of Egypt. so that the land may not perish through the famine. This proposal pleased Pharaoh and all his servants. And Pharaoh said to his servants, can we find a man like this, in whom is the Spirit of God? Then Pharaoh said to Joseph, since God has shown you all this, there is none so discerning and wise as you are. You shall be over my house, and all my people shall order themselves as you command. Only as regards the throne will I be greater than you. And Pharaoh said to Joseph, see, I have set you over all the land of Egypt. Then Pharaoh took his signet ring from his hand and put it on Joseph's hand, clothed him with a garment of fine linen, and put a gold chain about his neck. And he made him ride in his second chariot. And they called out before him, bow the knee. Thus he set him over the land of Egypt. Moreover, Pharaoh said to Joseph, I am Pharaoh, and without your consent, no one shall lift up hand or foot in all land of Egypt. Joseph was 30 years old when he entered the service of the Pharaoh of the king of Egypt. And Joseph went out from the presence of Pharaoh and went through all the land of Egypt. The guy went beyond what he was asked to do. To say, not only can I interpret this dream, but I will tell you what you should do. And you know what the guy does? What he does is basically shows off his own CV. He gave his own CV to the king, and it was obvious the king. So what this man is saying is actually himself. Do you realize they never asked for the job? Yeah, for you guys looking for a job. Do you realize that the guy did not ask for the job? How many of you go and volunteer? How many of you can go look for a job and say, don't pay me? I have a skill. I'll sort this problem, that problem for you. Don't pay me. Do you realize the way the system of this world works is once they see that you are useful, that you can solve the problem, they'll find the money to pay you? Anyone who is a problem solver will get paid. The only problem is that you want to go chase, I receive. That's what you want. You're going to chase, I receive. It's very interesting for me because they say if you have a problem, pray to God. If you don't have money, pray to God, God will bless you. But I stand in front here and asking you to give money to me. Does it make sense? Why am I not praying to the same God to bless me? If I want something, the church should give me. If the church wants something, pray to God. Something is wrong with this system. This is the one that the world laughs at the church. Because we do crazy things. There's no way you're going to harvest if you have not planted. And to plant, to harvest, there's work in between. Yes, I know people can say, oh, no, you work, you are lucky. That's what I like saying. In the Malawi way, lucky. Yeah? No. I am not driven by luck. It doesn't exist in my life. Actually, I used to have a definition for luck. What you call luck. Luck is when preparation meets opportunity. Preparation meets opportunity. Then you can be claiming, oh, it's luck, but there's nothing like that. It doesn't exist. Your life will be in problems if you're just waiting for luck. And we also have, for so many years, I remember when I was still in the world, they used to have this principle. You should always expect bad things to happen. When you have gone through good things, the next thing that's coming is a bad thing. Mbuzi ikagondwa I'm alone. It's evil, guys. You don't have to be waiting for bad things because bad things, no, the way things are working now, I think it have worked enough. I think it's coming. Let me prepare for it. No. It doesn't work like that. It doesn't work like that. Don't expect problems. Yeah? Like you have to, don't expect struggles. That sometime I will struggle. Enjoy what God is blessing you with. Do you realize that if you are, as we are seeing here, looking at the life of Joseph, we'll be saying Joseph was struggling, right? But the Bible just says Joseph had favor. You never see anywhere in this passage where Joseph is complaining. You will never find it. Where he's complaining. And God decided, okay, I want to give you even more details in the life of Paul. Paul was beaten to the point of death. Yeah? Paul was despised. All things happened to Paul. But Paul, the way you read the stories of his letters, the guy is happy. It means joy is not determined by circumstances. Joy is not determined by circumstances. Maybe happiness. Because happiness is people can fake it. I am happy. People can fake it with a smile. You can't fake joy. It's like peace. You can't fake it. I know, I like saying this when people have broken up. You know, I'm at peace. Are you at peace? Are you sure? There's no way you can be at peace. If you're in a relationship with somebody and things are broken up, there's always a time you have to heal. Don't try to create things that are not there. Okay? Accept it. It's part of the process of being a human. Yeah? It's not about, maybe I will look like I don't trust God. No. God likes a broken heart. Be broken to God, not to the man, to God or to the woman, but to God. Say it. I've wasted my time. Lord, I've wasted my time. It's okay. Go to God. Don't try to act as if you are smart and you are tough. There's nothing toughness in God. Actually, I'll talk about our reliance on God in the afternoon at in depth. But for now, let's finish our sermon. This man offered a solution, and Pharaoh was very clear that the person who can do this, who can really execute this solution, is this man Joseph. And he puts Joseph as the prime minister. When he was 30 years old. That's 13 years after his dream. Yeah? Do you realize that the dream has still not come to pass? He's prime minister, but the dream has not come to pass. You could have said, Abbas. Dafigapo. Isn't it? And how did he find this solution? His priesthood. His alignment with God made him to rule on earth. This solution he gave could never have come from anywhere but from his alignment with God. I remember I tell people sometimes, maybe they don't believe me, I tell them, when the science I do, the proposals or grants that I write, just like here, there's already proposal in this verse. I get them from prayer. And people don't understand when I say that. I'm telling you, it's true. I get them from prayer. They're on my phone. I can show you evidence. I pray. When I get feedback, I call it prayer feedback. I write it down. This is a grant you should write. On this is the questions you should be asking in that grant. Then I write the grant, and then it gets awarded. And then everybody else thinks I'm smart. But I'm not. It's because I'm tapping from a wisdom that is not of man. Because when the people see the proposal, they know that true. The man who can execute this thing is indeed this man. Why? Because the favor of the Lord is upon me. Because the presence of God is with me. Because he's inside me. My relationship with God, my priesthood, allows me to create solutions on earthly problems. Thy will be done where? On earth as where? It is where? Yes. It's priesthood and kingship. Thy will be done in heaven. That same will applies on earth, kingship. So you see that his alignment with God is what got him all the way to the position of prime minister. He actually had more authority, if you read carefully, than Pharaoh himself. Even though in the hierarchy, he was second in command. The guy who has a solution is the boss. But what you see in the life of Joseph is that Joseph was a servant. If it was you, you could have been saying, this company is running because of me. Yeah? Generally, no, it's not true. Joseph never did that to Pharaoh. He respected Pharaoh. Because he knew what he's running with is called delegated authority. The man behind the authority is still Pharaoh. Never underestimate the people that are above you. They might look like they don't know what they're doing. Until you go into their shoes, you realize what they're doing. Now, let's count how long it took for the dream to come into being. I just told you that at 30, just 13 years down the line, the dream has still not come to pass. If you continue reading, go to Genesis 42 up to 45, the chapters, right? You will see the manifestation of the dream. But I'll just summarize it for you. There's 7 years of plenty, right? So 7 years plus 13 is what? 20 years, right? The dream has still not manifested. Because at that point, he is not still ruling over his family. Because their family is not in Egypt. If you continue reading, you find 2 years into the 7-year famine. Now the family needs food. That's when the family starts to show up in Egypt. So if you add that 2 years, that's what the Bible tells us. If you add that 2 years, you find that it took not less than 22 years from the time this man had a dream to when it manifested. Selah. What about you? I thought things just happened. This is a man who walked with the favor of God. It took him 22 years. Do you realize now why he went through all this thing? The position this guy, God had set up for him to be prime minister, the responsibility of that position was so huge. Do you realize that if that solution he gave did not work out, he would have been eliminated by Pharaoh, eh? But he still kept him because the solution was correct. Go read the story. Actually, there's another, one day I'll teach about it. There's so much stuff you can learn from that story, the solution that he gave. That's so powerful. About how to run your own life, how to run your own finances. It's there. Go spend time reading about it and ask God to give you an understanding. 22 years it took for Joseph. 22 years for a man walking with God. If you go to the New Testament, it tells us why this happened to Joseph. What God was looking at was 4 million Jews that will leave Egypt. Later on with Moses. He says in the New Testament that Joseph was there to preserve Israel. Because the family of Joseph was only preserved because Joseph was the prime minister. Otherwise, Jacob and all his kids would have died of hunger. God's Bible says God sent me ahead of you. But he sent him ahead of everybody else, via prison, via slavery. You don't like it. Yeah? You know me, I'm very qualified. Why can't I take this job? No? This is too small for me, I'm too qualified. Your way to the top is that job. Your way to the top is that job. If you are not faithful with little, you will not be faithful with much. There's another man who God, he's a father, who God calls him the father of faith, Abraham. It took him 25 years from God's promise to the reality of that promise. 25 years. Even in between, he tried to help God. So you understand that how God builds man, how God raises man, there will always be time involved. There will be time involved. Like I said, there will be axe sharpening involved. God needs you to become. Because when you become, then you can have. He will build your character. He will build skill. Those things are the ones that will make you to be a king. That will make you to be a priest and a king. And it is the priesthood that drives the kingship. With no priesthood, forget about kingship. If you don't connect with God, if you are not have an intimate relationship with God, forget about being used by God. We like the latter, which is the influence, the kingship, the success, but we don't want the God behind the success. If it is God who gives you success, then for you to guarantee success, just stay with God. We will stop here today. And some other time, when I have more time, we'll go into another character. I hope you have learned something from this, and I hope you go and utilize it. Let's bow our heads in prayer.